This is Medley Prime, and today I'll be reviewing Volume 4 of the Energon Universe Transformers, which picks up from Volume 3, which entails Starscream's origin, featuring Omega Supreme, his leg burning, and tank tread replacement. The introduction of Blue Streak, who's like Prowl, a cop car, but a little bit more blue. Warpath the tank, and Blur the fast-talking dude. And then Megatron, Shredhead, and Trailbreaker. So we open up on the Free Comic Book Day tie-in with Jazz, Cliffjumper, RC, Blue Streak, and Prowl, and they're rocking it out. But Blur is, Blur is there. I meant Blaster isn't among them, which is weird because in the 80s cartoon, when Blaster was introduced in the year 2, 1985 lineup, he was big into playing music, and there was one episode with him and Trax where they fought Soundwave and I think Starscream in a nightclub. So as they're jamming out, Jazz is called over by Blue Streak, and he kind of feels a little surprised by Prime popping up and wondering what's going on. Because in the 80s cartoon, every time Jazz played music, Prime always told him to turn it off. And like the Vietnam generals, he wasn't very big on the rhythm and blues. He was more into the Clearwater revival with the movies where they fly the helicopter and all that. So they go to a lounge where there are human, to them anyway, human musicians, which is pretty cool. Then we skip over to the opening of issue 19, where Megatron is subject to a Quintesson-induced Groundhog Day, where they keep beating him up and abusing him over and over and over again. And it just keeps going and going, but there was one point which, hold on, if I remember, oh yeah, here we go. So my theory with Megatron's arm that Prime has attached to him was tied to Dark Energon because of the Prime cartoon when he created a bunch of zombies and killed Cliffjumper. But this time the Quintessons deliver up on the promise that was made to Galvatron in the 80s season 3 episode with the 5 Faces of Darkness, where they were trying to give him the Decepticon equivalent to the Matrix of Leadership. He gets a gift which is going to eat away at Prime very soon. Then we flash back to number 20, where Laserbeak is guiding Megatron around, and Soundwave is surprised by Astro Train popping up and getting ready to thrash Megatron. And so in the ensuing fight, he tosses him off a cliff. Then we transition to a bunker where Doc, who was voiced by the same dude who did Blaster, for the same dude who did Blaster for the 80s Transformers cartoon, did voice Doc for the 80s G.I. Joe cartoon. And so he's walking over and talking about how the private here is talking about him being a chaplain. And Doc is amazed by Ultra Magnus being held in captivity, which was another subplot from the Volume 3, where the G.I. Joe dudes were trying to figure out how he worked. And Doc talking to Ultra Magnus in later issues here reminds me a lot of I met a chaplain when I was in Georgia, and his name was Moses. And he reminded me of a friend I had in Army ROTC with the glasses and the hair, Goddins. And he helped me out with a lot of the interpersonal issues I had with some of the drill sergeants along the way until I got sent home. And so we move on to Spike and Prime talking. And they recover Jetfire, who in the Volume 2, he was shot down by Shockwave when Shockwave was invading, and Beachcomber has help with the aerial bots, such as Silverbolt, Air Raid, Slingshot, and hang on. Yeah, if I remember correctly. Yeah, they're all reintroduced here in the style of the Vector Sigma 86 episodes. So yeah, it's Air Raid, Fireflight, Skydive, Slingshot, and then their leader. I just pointed out that he has the fear of flying, which my uncle always thought was hilarious, is Silverbolt. And so we go back to Cybertron, where Shredhead, who in this continuity is a little bit like Hotshot, Drift, Windblade, and Knockout, in that they're newer characters created for certain continuities, as in Hotshot was Armada, Drift and Windblade were IDW 2005 G1, and the Knockout was from the Prime cartoon. Bulkhead, who's in between all them, the big green dude, he's coming in Volume 5 with Kirkman, as I guessed with the Volume 2. And the interviews I read with Kirkman, he was introduced and animated and brought over to the with the Prime cartoon. And so Shredhead here is Daniel Warren Johnson's contribution in that spirit, and he's hanging out with Cliffjumper, and he's having a heart-to-heart. And then skip over to Ancients like Omega Supreme with the episode War Dawn, and the other one, The Secret of Omega Supreme, where he was introduced as a buddy of the Constructicons before Megatron reprogrammed them to serve the Decepticon cause. This is a busted up Starscream, and Megatron manages to restore him with his Quintesson gift from earlier. And Megatron decides to demonstrate the power of his Quintesson gift by house cleaning Astro Train and killing him the same way that he did a bunch of the dudes with the 1986 movie and the shuttle. we transition back to Ultra Magnus and Doc talking and offering a bit of exposition between each other. And Ultra Magnus is appealing to see what they're going to do with experimenting on him. And Doc is a bit speechless. General Flag pops up, and he's supervising the trying to figure out the whole Magnus deal. Then again, we switch back to Cybertron again. It's Blue Streak and Elita. And they're worried about logistics. Which is funny because Void Rivals 24, they had Rodimus and Springer leave the two warring planets with the Sacred Ring, and my theory is prevailing that they will help with a lot of those problems. But in the interim, they decide that Shredhead and Cliffjumper have to have a contest to see who's going to go back to Earth. In a moment of time, then we skip back to Prime on the operating table having trouble with Megatron's arm again. And then they get ambushed. And in the carnage and chaos, Skywarp and Thundercracker teleport the Ark away. Like that. The aerial bots desperately combine into Superion to get Devastator and Bruticus to go away. More arm trouble. So they all decide to, in solidarity, blow his arm off, Megatron's arm off, and it's pretty gruesome. And then Megatron comes back, and he takes out Slingshot because IDW made a meme out of killing Slingshot. And for anyone who ever had the Generation 2 toy, Slingshot was made entirely of gold, and so yeah, he has to die for dramatic effect. Then again, going back to Cybertron after the people decide to help Prime, Elita decides to send one of them in the portal, which would be Cliffjumper, but then Cliffjumper pulls a fast one and instead throws in Shredhead. And she's very irate about that because she catches on. Prime's still in bad shape. All of the people that he helped out in the Volume 1 set decided to give back to him by bringing the deceased corpse of Ratchet, and it brings Optimus to the robot equivalent of Tears. Then Spike tries to take on the power of the Matrix, and Prime ends up in the afterlife. And the art style with the eyes over there with the yellow is based on his 80s Marvel comic design. We go back to Megatron looks down on Bambi, who Prime was sorry for stepping on in the first volume. Then we have a big bad battle in Chicago, and it's crazy. General Frag brings in Carly for questioning, and then Doc decides in the end that after watching Ultra Magnus get tortured, that he's going to save him, and so Ultra Magnus gets away with Carly. Prime is pretty much RIP, and like all of the times that he died you can find on the wiki, this is technically one of them. And then Shredhead appears. A battle on the level of the 1986 movie ensues. Prime is in the afterlife. And while there, he starts seeing visions of Spike's dad. And in the and then he's in the process of being dead. They decide to build him a new arm. Everybody's freaking out and upset and offering their eulogy. And in the process, Magnus comes back and he gives a heartfelt speech talking about how much he wanted to live up to Prime's example, which echoes a real life experience I've been having lately with my brother, because my dad has had a lot of health issues. I sometimes tend to feel really bad, and when I was reading this for the first time, what I could think of was how in the 1986 movie, Rodimus and Ultra Magnus both watch Prime die on the operating table after Perceptor tells him pretty much that his life is fading away. And so there was one time where I was talking to my parents and I had said that the dynamic between me and my brothers is a lot like Prime, Magnus, and Rodimus, as well as Batman, with where he has his first adopted son, Dick Grayson, and then Jason Todd, and Tim Drake, and Damian Wayne. And the difference is that Dick Grayson being his first, he eventually gets out on his own and fights people like the Vigilante, and leads the Teen Titans, and depending on who's writing, dates either Starfire or Batgirl, and he grows up and becomes his own man. And a lot of the animated DC movies, he comes back to help Batman out with a lot of the crazy villains that Batman can't deal on his own. And I've also told my dad before, and people that know my dad, that a lot of the other aspect with my younger brother Jonathan, he tends to have a bit of trouble dealing with my dad, and so he's a lot like Jason Todd, because Jason Todd is usually more remote and on his own, and trying to deal with the fact that Batman isn't big on dealing with dudes like Joker. But not necessarily the same in that aspect. Circumstance, it's more the he has a lot more issues with his adopted dad than Dick Grayson does. Then my other brother is kind of a split difference between Tim in the 90s animated Batman, where he grabs Dick Grayson and he tells him, I was hoping you guys could make up and be friendly with each other and work things out. And then he's also a lot like Damian in the sense that he's the youngest of all four of us, including my sister. And he is the most impressionable and wants to live up, but needs a little bit of guidance along the way. And so I was also going to say, there is a bit of Vader sometimes when my dad's in a bad mood, which Jonathan often cracks up about. And I've always felt the closest when it comes to Star Wars between Luke Skywalker and Grand Admiral Thrawn. because there is a comic where Dr. Aphra is watching Luke run around using the Force, and he says, "Hey, you're just like him," alluding to Vader. And Luke's a little confused because at the time, that comic set, it's between the first movie and Empire Strikes Back, so he doesn't quite know until obviously Empire Strikes Back that's his dad. And then the Thrawn aspect is in Heir to the Empire, and to a lesser degree, the Zahn novel where he teams up with Vader alliances. Thrawn kind of pokes fun at Vader's punishment of his subordinates by making fun of the fact that he chokes him instead of explaining to him how they messed up. Because one dude, he tells him that he has to understand the difference between an error and a mistake. And then when he's done with his explanation, he has his lizard buddy, Rook, slice the dude's throat. And then in Alliances, Thrawn figures out that Anakin and Vader are the same guy, but he doesn't run around telling everybody, which is why it's kind of funny how in the Ahsoka show, he correctly guesses that Ahsoka is Anakin's apprentice, and he makes fun of her after he strands her in the unknown regions where he was stuck with Ezra for a long while. And then I've also pointed out how my dad looks like a cross between Tom Selleck and Hugh Laurie as House, because Tom Selleck, when he played Magnum, my uncle said that he loaned him a Ferrari, and it was pretty funny. And then the thing about House was he said that he had a coworker where he used to work at a tech store, and she told him that the hair, the cane, and the disposition reminded her a lot of the way that House would talk to people. And so I've often explained to people that I am big on James Spader in The Practice and in Boston Legal, where he's very soft-spoken and very quiet, and he kind of has trouble talking to people sometimes because of how much he knows and how much he explains processes to other people. And then the last comparison I had for my dad is there's an episode of the G.I. Joe cartoon where Shipwreck, he gets a house for his family, ex-Navy and all. Well, he's a Navy dude, and my dad was in the Navy, so it's kind of funny because when I was a teenager, he bought a house for everybody to live in Tennessee, and he was explaining he was trying to be nice and responsible. And so, there you go. You have an epic declaration. And Magnus is resolved to fight. And so you have Megatron with his rallying call and Magnus with his rallying call. And then a grand epic battle. Then we go back to the Prime in the afterlife, and he finds the Bumblebee, corpse of Bumblebee, which when I first read the first issue with Daniel Warren Johnson introducing the notion of a dead Bumblebee, I was kind of upset because a lot of little kids look up to the little dude. And while they lost the copyright in the 90s, and in the early 2000s they made Hot Shot to replace him when they did Armada, Michael Bay, for better and for worse, managed to wait till they got the copyright back because they were competing with DC Comics at the time with the One Girl and the Teen Titans Bumblebee. And so he managed to bring him back and reinvented him with a Camaro, which is why the Travis Knight movie, he starts out as a Beetle and then he turns into a Camaro. And so that was the happy medium between the two. But I did read an interview where Warren Johnson said that he was tired of Cliffjumper being the one that gets killed, because in both the Prime cartoon and in the Bumblebee movie, Cliffjumper dies and no one really expresses any remote concern. And so he was taking the time in the comic series that he wrote so far here to show Bumblebee dying instead of it being Cliffjumper that does so as an inverse. Then more carnage, and he hurts Beachcomber pretty bad. And then more Afterlife, where Spike meets his dad. And then besides Bumblebee's death, Prime is affected by Jetfire, which is a little bit different because in the Fire in the Sky and Fire in the Mountain season 1 episodes, he doesn't interact much with Jetfire. And it's kind of like how I pointed out with Void Rivals, where Rodimus says, that's my teammate. It's I understand mixing things up a little. It's just a little weird sometimes. And then Ratchet makes a little bit more of a compelling case because other than Ironhide, he's usually the closest to Ratchet because Ratchet's the doctor of the team. And the closest they've ever gotten to kind of replacing him, which Kirkman may or may not do, is when they have the Protectobot first aid dude, like in the IDW 2005, later half of the Lost Light crew bouncing around the galaxy and universe. They meet first aid, and it's kind of hinted at in the season 3 of G1 where first aid tries to take Ratchet's job. And so, more exposition. The Matrix is still in his chest, and there may or may not be movement until finally it gets to the point where Megatron is threatening people, all the people. And what's crazy is that it turns out that Prime is actually alive, and he does the epic throwdown with one shall stand and one shall fall. And so there you go. It's a big clash. And that goes on for a while. And he's talking about weakness and strength. And so there's more and more and more. And more. I guess the point where he gets impaled, but not, he's already died, so it's not permanent. And all of the other Autobots are in pretty bad shape. And when it looks like all hope is lost, Omega Supreme pops up. And then Starscream changes his resolve back to where he was with his origin. And so he turns on Megatron. And then before Megatron can do anything, Shredhead pops up and he saves the day. And he pretty much forces all of the Decepticons into a retreat. And you got the trash talking with the sterner stuff as a throwback to the 86 movie. And so they're running away. And then Spike, Beachcomber recovers. Shredhead's in the back. And so they have a heart-to-heart. And Matrix, the Matrix has allowed for him to overcome the Megatron arm. And so that's pretty much it as far as this volume is concerned. Now, with respect to Rodimus and Springer, the next volume, what has happened is Kirkman has brought in Sideswipe, brought Black Blaster, brought back Brawn, ported in Mirage and Bulkhead, And he also had Slipstream and Blitzwing for the Decepticons. And so I'm curious to see. I know he's having Thundercracker switch teams and Shockwave coming back, but what I'd really like is for him to do, as far as his half of the run is concerned, have your bring in a Jaxus, Bludgeon, Scorponok, somebody other than just Megatron and Shockwave would be cool. But that's pretty much it.